Hello and welcome to Need, a human design podcast. My name is Nicola Henderson and I'm your host and guide. In this episode, I'm featuring Giacomo Marcone. He's an Italian currently living in Norway, and he's been in his human design experiment for almost 4 years, about the same time as me. He's also a right brain and right mind. Now, Giacomo is a 2-4 self-projected projector with the channel of awakening and the channel of the alpha, and he's on the right angle cross of consciousness. I really enjoyed this conversation with Giacomo, and we dived right in. We kick off the episode talking about environment. Giacomo is Selective Caves. His partner is Internal Markets. Giacomo shares a bit about being a right brain and right mind, so living as a receptive being in a strategic world. We talk about the courage to follow one's authority and the challenges that can come up with that. He shares a bit about the channel of the alpha, the 731, and how that has played out for him as a receptive leader. And also how this is combined with the channel of awakening, the 1020. Giacomo has inner vision and low sound, so there's some interesting bits shared around eating and how inner vision expresses itself with his cognition. Giacomo has 3 wide open centers, the spleen being one of them, and that he shares as being the most difficult deconditioning for him, to do with the extreme fears of survival, essentially, that come through that. I share a little bit about prime and epsilon issues and ask about his personality, Sun in Gate 5 and Earth in 35. And we go into transference and distraction. Giacomo and I both have need motivation. We round out talking about the self-projected authority and the challenges of being a projector. I do hope that you enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Are you still in Norway?
I'm still in Norway now, yes. I'm gonna stay here only, this is my last week, and then I'm gonna move to Italy a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been here since December last year. 9 months of trying this place, and I mean, it's been interesting. Out environment, mostly. Yeah.
How so?
It was incredible to notice many things. Watching really how it is in details, like noticing the differences, the subtle differences in my frequency in every environment. Because me and my partner Mar, we have been moving. We've been in like 4 different places in these 9 months. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 4th place we've been, and currently this place we are here is the most, for both of us, I would say, aligned to our correct environment. Has been also the shifting in the frequency of me and Mar together, me alone and them alone, was very interesting to notice. The environment really can shift a lot, and obviously having the awareness of this system can really help to navigate these things.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, like we all had in the past, you just don't know what it is, and you just navigate it with. And eventually, a knowledge comes. I believe that a knowledge comes when it's meant to, and everything is a learning anyway. And then you can reflect back and see, oh, that was like this, like that, But now it's been fascinating. A lot of friction as well, a lot of a little bit unpleasant frequencies, and then you notice its subtle changes here and there in a different environment that you are. And then when you change it, you can almost instantly feel when the environment is correct that it is an instant change in the frequency, and it's really something quite immediate, I would say, anytime you enter into a place that is more aligned with you. You notice it right away. You notice your the frequency of your voice, what comes out of you, the way you deal with things daily, whatever comes to you, whether it's a challenge or something pleasant. The environment really has a huge impact in our lives, and it's also something that one thing I've learned is also something that comes naturally. I would say environments for me are not something that I could just go out and chase, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I can go and strenuously look for or wanting to put myself in that environment because this is going this way. It's something you notice naturally and it takes time. I mean, it takes a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
also sometimes the most essential thing, although we are meant to step into a geometry, our path, this is aligned with us, but we don't know when you step into places that they are not correct, I would say, for you, that those are the places that teach you the most. Because when you step in a place that is actually right, after being in an environment that wasn't correct, you feel the shift, the instant shift is more. It's just an education, I would say. I like to call them. When you are not in the right place, it educates you way more than when you are. It's also almost like making you ready for correctness to come at some point. I mean, this is how at least I like to see.
Yeah. You're both hardscape, right? Your caves, your selective caves, and Mara's internal markets.
Yes,
So that's helpful, I suppose, to have
it's
some.
helpful. It is because selective caves and market, especially the internal, is the most, I would say, cave correlated. It's not cave at all because it's the second color, but is the most cave related because essentially internal market is that internal market. So it implies a sort of indoor theme. Like caves is the fullest, like the ultimate indoor artscape. Although artscape are pretty much indoor, also external market. It's just not your home. It's external market, an external business place, but it's still from indoor to indoor. Internal market and caves are very similar. What I like to say, like socially speaking, from an evolutionary point of view, what cavemen were literally people that were staying in the caves, going out the cave to hunt that one thing that was needed and retrieve. The cave was the market has been the next step where one tribe was starting to meet the other. Or the internal was a tribe that was inviting the stranger in. So it's a step, it's a movement, but it's still very much correlated. Although markets are very much connected to the theme of trades and exchanges, and whereas the cave is especially selective, which is the very beginning of humankind, like in environment wise.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying around how you can really feel when you're in the wrong environment. I mean, I think of where I live here in this small little seaside town, and there's a couple places I always go back to. I'm narrow valleys. And there's other places that just feel unsettled in. But, a year ago, 5 years ago, would I have had that same awareness? Would I have had that same sort of energetic attunement, I suppose is the best way to put it. And as you say, you can't be strategic around putting yourself in the best environment. It just sort of has to unfold. And that was something for me that it took a bit to grapple with and sort of understand, as opposed to thinking, how can I put myself in the right places to meet the right people, to manipulate my knowledge of the system. It doesn't work like that.
I mean, it's very easy to do. It's very easy to do. As I said earlier, it's also something that sometimes is necessary to go through those steps of, we call it not self, but I like to call it more education. When I relate to being receptive, I strongly relate to the dependent variable, the sun, personality and design, which are both right oriented, they are right fixed. In the environment and perspective, I'm left. So they're both strategic. Although, even though my environment is the first tone, which is smell, which is inherently strategic by nature, it's not the search for their environment, as we just said. that is strategic in itself is how you select the beings that they are allowed in your environment when you are in it. So there is that strategicness, I would say, call it sometimes make up words, aspect of it. Yeah. The aspect of being selective, being actively selecting who is allowed and who is not. That's how selective caves, right? But the search from the environment itself is a natural process.
Yeah.
Then when you are in it, there is an aspect, but again, that's natural. When you find yourself, myself, for example, selecting or who comes in, it's not that I take a list and it's not something that I strategize upon. When the situation occurs, maybe if there is a person that I don't really want to have in my environment after all, cave people, and I agree, is the most antisocial being ever, I would say. In the cave, right? I mean, it's true. But the thematic is, if you look at the evolutionary steps of humanity, I mean, it makes sense. And then the thing is to translate it into today's society and, notice how it is. Because it's not that you can go to a cave and hit in the head somebody that comes in because they don't want it. Today we live in a, it's a different world.
Yeah, it's quite a magical thing,
It
environment.
is.
So I want to backtrack. We've dove right in, which is awesome. I'm looking forward to two receptive projectors getting together and just seeing what comes out. I was likening it to a field of wildflowers, just like frolicking in receptivity. I want to officially open this up and just say a heartfelt thank you for doing this. And we collaborated on the fourth line thing, which was a really fun thing for me to do as well. And maybe something else will happen. We've got a few electromagnetics, so it makes sense that there might be some compatibility there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate is that you are I use this word grounded. But what I'm really trying to say is that you don't lose sight of the basics. I've popped into your Telegram channel a couple times and had a listen of things. And, you talk about more advanced concepts, but in your stories as well, you always bring it back to the basics of this. And I think that no matter where we're at on our human design journey, it's easy to lose sight of this. And that's something that I really appreciate. And there's no sort of airs and graces. There's no fluff. It's just, you sharing the information that you've taken in and how you understand it. And you do it really well. And
thank you.
I know it's a balance, isn't it, when you're sort of creating and you're putting energy into doing things and how much recognition is coming back for that and that whole thing, right? And I guess it just felt really important for me to reach out to you and just say, like, I see what you do and you do it excellently. And that's why I had to do this and invite you on, create this, invite you here for this, to have the conversation. I don't know. It was a strong pull. I couldn't not have done it. And then it's like the days leading up, I'm like, oh my God. Then I start getting really insecure about my receptiveness. And I'm like, what is this going to be? Is it going to be any use? Like, are you going to do it good? All these silly things come into play, but that's my own journey in trusting my receptiveness. So I suppose that's a good segue. I mean, so you're right brain, right mind. What's your journey been like with that, living in a strategic world?
It's about noticing the limitation of it fully and taking it as it is, in a sense. It is a trip, a nice one, because our configuration is how we are born with it, right? So sometimes we forget that we've always been like this, and not just from when we discover human design. We've been like this since the day one. And when we get to this knowledge, as I like to say, is nothing really changes, because your design is what it is. It's never going to change. What is changed for me in this context has been, how can I identify, in the sense, give name to things easily. Whereas before I was just out in the chaos of what this is, what that is. It's not really that. It's like getting the awareness of being receptive is really something that helps to accept who you are and the limitation that you think you had that before you thought were bad problems, right? We see very often a lot of mental psychological diagnosis made with people that they're basically just receptive. Imagine maybe quote right people, they're fully receptive being. There is no strategy, there is no, for example, me, when I study something, for example, I don't remember anything. I feel I'm always blank, right? Always. When I study something, I read something I like, studying PHS, whatever, in human design, anything. It's like having a blank mind. You just go. The day after, you open your book again, and you maybe, sometime I find myself going back and read a few pages. Okay, I just don't know. It's gone, but it's there. It's not that it's gone on the surface, but it's all into that storage that we have, which is pretty much the head center. And in a world that is strongly left-oriented, after all, we are just in the middle phases of evolution. We are a transitory species, after all. And for right people, for rightness, and I'm talking just, as I said earlier, with the top personality and design, sun and earth variables, it is almost a moment where, now I don't want to say that they are limited or inferior. That's not the point. Is this beginning, starting to taste this flavor of rightness, what it is, but it's not something that is fully developed. After all, we're going to see the next cycle, this new being that will emerge. They will be the full representation of rightness, in the body, like in fully. But because we live in a world that is strongly left-oriented, there is, how to put this, is we kind of have to, in a sense, naturally adapt to what it is. It's not a world, in my perspective, it's not a world allowing rightness to be what it is at all. So, I mean, and also, what I was saying the other day is following one's authority sometimes can be quite brutal. And I don't think, personally, me included, of course, that not so many people would have the courage to actually do everything that their authority is inviting you to do. Like, I like to see the example of Rauro, who, like, he was living in this tree in Ibiza before, with a chair and a tree, okay? I mean, not everybody will have the courage to do that. But I wouldn't be surprised that, now, not that same exact thing, yes? Like, there are many, but I wouldn't be surprised that for many beings, something like this might actually be correct. And it's insane. I mean, we are not, you need to be brave to actually do it fully, you know what I mean? It's something that goes really way beyond anything we can, authority.
Yeah.
There is this thing, my authority will bring me to pleasant situation, and that's not the case. And we are only focused on wanting to be good, wanting to express our signature, and like, yes, that's ultimately a byproduct of correctness. But our authority sometimes can drive us to situations that are really bad as they appear for our mind.
It's a really, really solid point to bring up around trusting what our authority is saying. And sometimes it's really hard to know. And I'm really curious to know what that is like for you. I mean, it's not always hard to know, and maybe it's just my mind saying it's hard to know. So I'm a splenic projector, right?
Yeah.
But that gut instinct and having that openness and this rush of excitement that can sometimes come through with things, it can be difficult to sort of to pick up on what the response is. I mean, a no is really quite clear. but if it's a yes, but I'm maybe nervous about saying yes to the thing, listening to the response, that's maybe where, it comes in from what you were saying. Sometimes it's hard to listen to your authority.
It's like fully surrender to it. And as I said earlier, I put myself included in this. It's not like that bravery to actually follow it fully. I mean, is not given to everybody. I would say it's really not.
Yeah.
And maybe we are not even meant to do it like that until, as some people are not even meant to get across knowledge like this, or
Mm,
some people are not even meant to wake up in any given life. I mean, who said that we all have to wake up in a way? Maybe some people are not even meant to do it in this. The potential is there, yes. But how we all live our design is, the design is there, the potential is there, but there are stuff that are way far beyond what we can see in a body graph,
yeah.
Genetic correlation, past, generational stuff. I mean, there is something that, after all, it just goes as it has to go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And as a seeker, that is a really interesting point for me to consider. So with my design Earth and Gate 11,
Yeah.
yeah, I've had a life of always sort of trying to find out what's next and to see what's
Yeah.
next on the horizon for myself and keep pushing forward and getting to that next level of whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a couple ways that I'd like to sort of take this. I'm really curious to dive
Mm.
into your personality, Sun and Earth, but
Yeah.
I think that this is probably a good time. I want to ask you about something. So, this is in your recent introduction post, and my dog
Okay.
is snoring next to me.
Okay.
So, if you might not hear it, but just in
Yeah.
case you hear little
That is
like
pleasant sound anyway. Yeah.
fluffing sounds, I'm not sort of farting or something. It's my dog. So.
No. That's okay.
So you have the collective channel, the channel of the alpha, and the
Yeah.
individual channel, channel of awakening. So you said that you go through looking at patterns and experiencing life in order to get to a place where you can fully accept the process and purpose of being in form.
Yeah.
There's a lot of richness to that. And I mean, I'd love to hear in your passive contemplation around this topic, where are you at with this process and purpose of being in
I
form?
think it's a lifelong process. It's not something I'm ever gonna reach a point of completion. In my perspective, having
Yeah.
a logic channel as a 731 is, and his placement is not above the throat. It's something that, yes, is pattern oriented, is leading, is looking at patterns, so it's left, inherently left, if you look at it. With a passive brain and receptive mind, it's just that taking in, and it's not, the moment I'm invited to lead, it is not something that, yes, is logic, yes, is inherently left as a channel, if you want to call it this way, but it's something that also comes out from my identity itself.
Mm.
So I personally can't, or nor I try to do something about it. Like it is a leadership that it comes out, and it's also part of my authority, of course, together with the channel of awakening. So it's not something that I mentally trying to construct. It's not a leadership that, yes, is pattern oriented. It has this nature of looking at pattern and moving forward for an improved future, after all. So that's what leadership is, moving forward through repetition. The repetition is a constant repetition of absorbance of anything about the world around me. What I see, what I sense is all a taking in. When I'm placed in an environment and I have the opportunity to lead a team, it happens in the past. I work in a place in England, was a little company. They were selling organic products, and they had a very small warehouse. It was a nice environment in the sense that I thrive with very small teams, right? But by placing myself in that environment, by starting to work there through time, I take in everything that goes in, everything that's going on in that environment. I just take it in. It's a full taking, like a sponge. The moment that somebody, and is a reluctant leading, it's not something I want to do. It's not something that I want to wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to lead. Today I'm going to guide this team for this and that. No. Yes, his nature is logic, But the way I operate, looking at variable configuration, is like I take in everything when I'm in an environment, but personally in an environment, like in aura speaking. I'm very much a person that really function very well in aura, in environment. Of course, you don't feel an environment through a camera as you do when you are in aura in a place, right? So same with people. So when the opportunity comes for me to lead somebody, which then happen, then is a natural process. Then I watch it happening, and its direction is oriented through logic. So that's how it works. And it's also very much connected to the collective. It's a collective channel. So it's going for the collective, moving forward. And then you have a 10-20 that is integration, which pretty much doesn't care about anybody, pretty much. So it's like a two voices together, and I feel it sometimes. And the collective, the 731 demands, this has to be in this place, this and there to move forward. This needs to be repeated, perfect. It has to be a certain logic through it. And it always involves the other as a logic channel. When you look at the 10-20, it's something that you might die now to make it hard, but it's literally what it is. It's like I'm going to be whether the most awake or the most asleep, because there is the binary, right, of channel of awakenings can be also called channel of sleepness, if you want to put it that way. Yeah. But it's something that, okay, I'm awake in this moment, you follow me. If you don't, I don't care. I go ahead. The integration is the most selfish, careless about the other as possible. You have this collective that is all a mix of stuff, right? I mean, it's something that you will end up I personally feel that it's not a lifetime is not even enough to actually decode a whole body graph of anybody. And it's not even the point, I would say, is that the point is just living it. And what you said earlier about the basics is that because the basics are everything.
Yeah.
Although the basics are the surface, and then when you go to the tonal architecture underneath, that's actually where the whole magic is coming from. But after all, it's below the line, so it's nothing that we have access to. So it's something that is there as a potential. And the basics, yes, is the illusion, but it's actually where we operate is on there, right? The potential is underneath, but we operate on top. And as is the top that we deal with, and it's the top that we live in, whatever we see day after day is basically the surface. So, and also the easy is always the way, I believe. The strategy and authority pretty much, you have enough to do for a lifetime if you want to. The rest is curious, is interesting, but it doesn't really make anything. Yeah, it helps you to get some Satori moment sometime to get that click, but a click alone doesn't lead so much ahead. It's a steady process of forming one's nature that does it, right? Yeah, I mean, I can go along that. I never stop. But
So, how far along have you been in your journey? Just for some context.
When I started?
Yeah.
Okay, so the very first time I heard about human design was at the very end of 2020.
Yeah. So what have you found about your experience, like how you experience life before and where you're at now, and even your very early stages of understanding the system? How would you explain that evolution?
Well, when I first encountered the system, I've been told about it, and I started to read something about it. Now, back then, I was a completely different person. There was something, when I first encountered, just to make it clear, when I first encountered it, I felt this is incredibly interesting, okay? I didn't have any wow reaction, though. I was always kind of very composed, in a sense. I recognized this potential quite right away, and then I let it go for quite a while. The thing that stayed with me was pretty much my energy management, my energy availability with an undefined sacral, and the strategy. Those were the very first two things that I started to experiment with. And all the rest I let it go. I didn't went deep at all. I didn't read so much. I just took those two aspects and went along with it. Because for a reason, I didn't feel ready to dive into it. I was in a space in myself where emotionally and physically I wasn't doing the best. I was all over the place. And I was fully into my mind movie. Like, clearly speaking, fully in there. I wasn't able to differentiate what was what. When was the mind, when wasn't. I completely on the mercy of the mind, like fully. Like very strongly back then. Not that I'm free from it now, because that's not the point. That I'm not this kind of people. But there was a moment where I was going through a process, and I had a dear friend with me, a projector friend, that she was helping me to notice the mind. Now, without this system at all, now with her help, she's a self-projector as well, with the channel of the prodigal. Same authority, although is defined through another channel. Through her guidance back then, I was a person who was very difficult to deal with. Honestly, I was falling into my mind movie. One day, it happens that I realize the mind, if you want to say it like that. I noticed that the mind was there. In a sense, wasn't a mystical, it was anything. I just had a conversation with somebody, and for the first time, I felt the voice of the mind. I noticed that sometimes, that wasn't always me. That the mind speaks as well. Its voice, its frequency, which is very specific. When is the mind talking? When is the body? Okay, so you can pick up a frequency even if you don't know anything about design. So you can just feel it. And you, with feeling cognition, you might have something about that, like, especially. But and then after that moment, I was like, oh, now I got the mind. Now everything should come to me, right? Now everything should be fixed. I got the mind now. Now why stuff don't move?
Yeah.
Wait and hope. I mean, it is the beginning of the correctness. It's not the end point. After that moment, I felt, okay, I can dive into this now a bit. Like it was almost as if my body in the beginning didn't say, all right, look, this is potent, is strong, you are not ready for it. Like you need to wait a little bit longer. And then after that moment, I started to dive into slowly, very slowly. I studied a bit, I let it go for another few months, and then I went back into it. But my body wasn't ready for that. And then the process of studying it a little bit more started, and over time, I mean, I'm taking it easy anyway. But yeah, that was, and then all the rest came, right? Watching. But again, my energy management and the strategy and the authority, of course, are the thing that I mean, after all, it all goes back there. There is so many words about it, which is, as I said earlier, that is so interesting. But I mean, that's pretty much all we need about this system. It really is. And it might be, all right, so that's it. Yeah. That's pretty much it, after all. It's not... But of course, if you stop everything there, clearly speaking, there wouldn't be any money to be made by anybody. Because, I mean, that's the reality after all. That's true.
So how do you use your cognition, inner vision, to help you make, like, not make decisions, but maybe sort of, help guide yourself through life?
The inner vision is something that is strongly receptive by nature again. Honestly, let's take in the context of eating. For example, when we eat, like in my case, there's a lot of sound with inner vision, is the beginning of the process. I would say, although it's part of the mental realm, because it's the ajna binary, but it's moving towards the full rightness. So it's the beginning of the process of rightness. When we go from smell, taste, outer vision, inner vision, feeling, touch, is like this movement from left to right. So this is the beginning of the process, is I would say, a clear representation of how a passive brain works, how this taking in, how this not interpreting, but just taking. So it's like when you eat, for example, and inner vision is periodic. So it's something that doesn't have any specific timing, I would say, as an ajna binary. You never know when the hint or the click comes. It might come once in 10 years. It might come every week or every day. It's not something And it's not even cyclical like the solar plexus binary. Cyclical is beginning, middle, and end. It's a cycle through which you feel or through which you pick up frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Inner vision is something that occurs suddenly, without any agenda, without setting up. It's like when you eat, for example. Let's make this example. Any right tones fixing in the sun-earth variable, in the determination, is like when you eat something with a right tone, even though it has nothing to do with condition, but is circumstance-based as a right, is receptive and is also upper color. So even though maybe you have, for example, cold thirst, so you're supposed to eat cold, drink cold, but then you have a right tone, so fixing it, of course, otherwise would be hot. But it's like when you put things in, try not to interpret anything. With a right tonal fixing, whether it's the first color, the sixth color, whatever it is literally going through you start to teach the body to go through the process of experiencing rather than interpreting. So when it's the inner vision is the starting point towards ultimate acceptance of the sixth tone. It is a movement that is starting to move again towards the rightness, towards that non-interpreting but just experiencing. And yes, then you have all this methodology, like close your eyes when you eat, and it works, and with the inner vision, low sound in this case. But it's something that really happened. I mean, it just happened. It's not even that I say, now, if I eat like this, my inner vision will work. No, it doesn't work like that. Because you're already putting noise up there. You're creating this distorted little noise that is not necessary. So when you have this, really, the experiential way after all.
I'm curious to know how you experience your inner vision as a cognition. Like, from what I have read, outer vision people, they'll have really, they might have really bright, well decorated houses. They might dress more, colorfully or vibrantly. Inner vision people, the inner world is a lot more engaging or, vibrant, I suppose, or dynamic.
It is basically how things looks on the inside rather than on the outside, right? Yeah, the example that you just did, outer vision, there is an outer vision, so it's a looking outward. So it's a vision of forms and vision of pattern and vision that's something that you see materially on the outside from, on the outside. Inner vision is something that just is an inner process. And I've been always saying in the past, very early in my life also, when I eat something, to me, it doesn't really matter if it looks good. I always been somebody that eat because it felt good inside rather than how it looks on the plate, just to make it easy, And then inner vision occurs, just to make an example, sometime, and this happened, of course, I try to follow my PHS the most. I'm very consistent in my experiment with in low sound determination. For example, earlier, just to make an easy example, me and Mar were doing some quiz. We have this card, the I Ching card with each gate, and then we read it to each other and we try to guess which gate it is. Right? Just to make it easy. So earlier, I was like, Mar was about to read a gate, and I said, I feel that now it's going to be gate 52. And then they actually read gate 52. Wow. And then it happened again. Maybe now it's going to be 15. And it's not something that it just came, right? And then they end up reading 15 again. Or that's pretty much how inner vision works. It's something that just occur suddenly, like periodically, whenever, I didn't know. Or maybe one night I imagine like Mara were having the birthday and their sibling told them, I got you something from Amazon. And then at night, I thought, they got him a book from Amazon. And they actually got him a book from Amazon. So, that's how it works.
Sporadic.
And you never know when. That's it.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Interesting. So, if we look at deconditioning, what have been some of your bigger challenges, would you say, where you've had your not self and where you've had to decondition, and maybe what you're still or currently grappling with around that?
Yeah. I mean, let's make an example of a completely open spleen. That has been something that I really feel a lot in my body. One of the things, and there are many, consider the amount of open center. I mean, we both have 7 open, undefined centers, so
Mm.
you know how it feels. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start here because it's a lot. But let's say with a completely open spleen, in a previous relationship of mine, it was fascinating to notice, even in the beginning of the experiment with human design, to see how mechanics really are uncontrollable. Like,
Mm.
it's mechanics is really something that happens regardless of we want it to happen or not. Like, this is really something important that I think people is you can be now. I'm not dogmatic. I'm very open in I'm a completely open artist, so I'm not certain about anything. I just give people the freedom, of course, and myself as much as I can to be, try and think and be certain whatever they want, if they are or not. So this is not being dogmatic, but what I recognize about this system, it's really that mechanics happen. I mean,
Mhm.
that's literally something happen. Like, somebody can be skeptical. You might not like human design. You don't even have to. It's not for everybody. I recognize the system. It doesn't mean that everybody should. Like, and I see and I observe the mechanics in people around me, and I mean, it's freaking works. That's how they are. So you just see it in reality, and there is anybody to convince about it. But
Yeah.
having a completely open, also spleen,
With 5 gates pointing at it.
yes, which is quite a lot, and
Yeah.
it
6.
means that it's gonna pretty much always gonna be lit up with so many gates looking towards it.
Yeah.
Is very much the case, as in my undefined agenda with an open agenda with undefined head, all the 3 gates up there. So it's pretty much always plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, looking for.
Yeah.
In a way or another, it's always going to be lit, whether it's the transit, whether it's somebody else. So, but when you are in a relationship with a person that had a spleen that was almost all defined, apart from 1 gate, and wow, I mean, you really feel the attachment and the mechanics of an open or undefined splenic center when the mind tries to become the spleen and lead it. You just cannot let go.
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You can't. It can be the most, and not just for the person with the undefined spleen. I'm speaking about also the other person as well. There is not always one way straight. There's always when 2
Mm.
people, it's not always there. I mean, I don't agree. That's like, because you just can't do it. You can't let go. It takes a long time. And until then, at some point, life, reflecting back, life tries to, in a way, to show you, hey, look, this needs to be let go. You need to let go of this. Like, and then present the situations where the way to actually move forward comes. And then you just can't do it. It's the most addictive drugs we have together with the mind, because after all, it's the mind that identifies with each other centers. I try to give its voice to it.
Yeah.
But with a spleen,
Yeah.
like, it's just you are addicted to it. It's the most potent drug. That's why I like some people when they ask me, if you take drugs and stuff. No, I mean, I personally, I just feel that if we have the mind, it's enough, right? If you want to take one, you have it inbuilt already, so you don't need to take it. No, really, like, to take it from the outside, because that's what it does. And yes, an open spleen can really be a trip, and it's really something that you feel. I feel it, like we were talking, me and Mar, the other day. When we are together, there is this sense of, because we define each other's spleen, right? We both have it. Mine is completely open, they have it undefined. And then maybe there is a moment where they might spend some time with their parents and sleep at their place a bit. And then we both just watch. It's just watching it. The moment we are away for a bit, it's like there is always immediately that sense of instability. But there is not being, that's just mechanics. You just watch it, you feel the body. Now the spleen is not lit up. It's blank again. The feeling of unsafety, like it kicks in instantly. It's like, it's a very strong conditioning. It's like, and it's the one that I feel the most, physically speaking. Is a sensation that I feel in my body, for real. And it's kind of something that is always gonna be there. This is just how, because the spleen works like this. It works like this. When it's undefined, when it's open, and then it's suddenly lit up, and it's suddenly blank up again, you're gonna feel that. And the point is just noticing that that's the mechanic, and then it's how it operates, and there is nothing to worry about. You're safe after all. You are home, in your place, you're in bed. There's no threats.
Yeah.
But is that? Yeah, this is one of the things.
Yeah. So it is that sort of feeling like a threat to your survival. It's not just you miss one another or you crave each other's company. It's more primal.
Yeah. And there's also something that, by the way, just came up, can really, of course, can really lead to a very strong codependency attitude. A lot. Because you don't want to feel that. Like, you don't want to feel unsafe. You might always, stick together like two stickers. It's then once you have this awareness of the mechanics, you can actually notice that there is no threat. Yes, it's literally survival. It's like, it can be, yes, wanting to be together, but it goes far beyond that, as you just said, of course. It's literally being afraid of dying. That's what it is, after all. Like, rooted underneath is exactly that. The spleen feels like, I'm gonna die now. And then it just...
It's really interesting. When I just finished not self-analyst training with James Alexander, and this concept that he taught us was the prime or epsilon issue, which I'd never heard of before. I mean, so you've got three open awareness centers, even though you'd have an epsilon issue because the ego is your top open center.
Yeah.
So, and I have a prime issue, which is because I have a defined ego. So my solar plexus is my top open center. So prime issue means that you basically, like, people are scary, the world is scary, and there's this fixation on what direction you're going. But when you have all three awareness centers open like you, that's sort of going to be compounding. And how he described it was, this prime and epsilon issue is like the foundation, the basement of the not self that everything sort of filters on top of. But the epsilon issue with the, say someone has, defined spleen, but an open ego, their basement of their not self, their mental trip is like, I'm the problem. So they always think that, but I mean, there's four centers. I mean, so even if they had defined ego, but still an epsilon issue, it would still be that similar theme to the narrative, to what we say to ourselves all the time. Even though I have a defined spleen, and I have a fairly consistent sense of well-being within myself, I still, because of that prime issue that I still haven't, it's not all the time, but it seems to be, come and go. I don't know if you'd say it was cyclical, but and I couldn't say how frequently it happens, but it's like, even my phone going off, I'm like, oh no, it's like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. It's a really, really uncomfortable trip to persevere through.
Yeah.
Not fun. It's not a good feeling.
I mean, it's also very interesting to notice in your design. It's very interesting what you said now, by the way. I haven't took that course yet, but it's definitely something that sounds very interesting, very well. And looking at your tones in both the top variables, feeling and touch and acceptance. I mean, as a study case, I would say it's very interesting to notice when the tones are in a being and to notice if the awareness center that is part of those binaries is actually defined or not.
Mm.
Because the potential of an undefined or an open center, together with, for example, our solar plexus binary tones, as the 5 and the 6 that you have, is sort of as an enhanced, multiplied potential to actually experience that awareness, right? In a sense. Because as we know, as definition is always a limitation, openness is always a potential for wisdom. And then there are many different configurations. You might have you have 36 and 55. So the biggest potential for that, fifth and sixth tones is actually will be expressed with the 30, 36, 55, and the 6. Is like this binaries, like when we look at the ajna, for example, for me as an inner vision, is part of the ajna binary. Also, right tonal fixing as outer vision and inner vision, they are both part of the ajna binary. But if we look at the triangle, when we look at the tonal architecture, the inner vision will be more related to the head center than the ajna, because it's a storage. So, I mean, yeah, what you said, it makes sense about, I mean, you also have feeling cognition, so I'm not surprised what you said about the phone. The phone ringing and jumping up, for example. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's very sensitive to those kind of frequencies. It really does. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I really enjoy my feeling cognition. It's a lot of fun. I'm asking you this because I'm just really curious. So my personality Earth is in 36, your personality Earth is in 35. Big aha that I've had in the last year around understanding, how my sun Earth wants to get to the throat, and my trip around craving change and progress and not wanting to be bored. Boredom is like the worst thing in the whole world for me. That was like really, really huge for me to see that is actually in my chart, and that it's part of my not self, and it's not actually just how life is, and it doesn't mean that I have to go and try and change things. I was having a quick scan at what the Ravi Ching says about 5 and 35. So with that polarity, it's almost like there is, I mean, polarities have tension in them anyways, but particularly with this. So, I mean, you've got your personality sun in gate 5, so fixed rhythms. Just finding my notes here. So ignoring the temptation to take premature action, right? So it's like very
that's a thing.
amazing. And then we've got this 35, which is the expressed experiential way about progress and taking action. So how do you experience that?
Well, it's the prime challenge in my life, after all. Yeah, that's it. It is. It is. They are two parts that fit each other, whether it's on a positive side or not. I mean, there's not really positive or negative, but there is just differences in frequencies. But yes, the 5 and 35, I mean, they are my two. I've been, by the way, also delving into gene keys a bit, but it's a process that I'm keeping quite a lot for myself, not as a being selfish, not sharing it, but it feels that it's a very intimate process in and of itself. Like, they really, really put a lot of awareness on top of these two gates for me, because they are the themes that I see recurring the most in my daily life now, in the future, when I will get to the point, and in the past there is an impatience that feed this hunger, right? If you look, the fifth can really be impatient a lot, and I've been an impatient being forever, like always. Like I remember my family telling me, "You are impatient as hell." Yeah, I remember this because I've been since I was a child, like forever, impatient, and this boredom and this hunger for experiences, this what's next, and then it's going to go into the logic, not self real, having an experience, this went this way, I need to repeat it and doing this way, this way, this way. So, it should be like talking about inner vision as well, the beginning of that process, the beginning of experiencing. And as it is also both in the second lines, is like something that is even very much aligned to naturalness, as the second line beings are. That openness for the call, this being aligned with what's easy for you and being patient, that, the call would come. While, instead of being impatient, being involved in what's correct. So, maybe you get to know your talent already. And if you got to know it, you just enjoy it without, you don't need to learn anything more. You just need to refine it. You just go along with your process. And after all, impatience and hunger are these two themes of the 5 and the 35. They're always going to be there. I mean, it's part of my incarnation cross and is the prime. It is a challenge in my life. It will always be. It will always be. It's always for the next. Always this rushing up the process, not being impatient. After all, I mean, and yes, you have gate 36, and I've been experiencing the transit in Neptune in 36 for 2 years, and man, that was something quite interesting. And reflecting back, honestly, it made so much sense when it ended. When it ended that transit, I felt like suddenly very, very strongly not grounded. Suddenly, it was a little disturbance, almost as if that identification with the transit became reality throughout all that time, in a sense, very subtle. And then you notice this crisis one after the other. It's like very heavy. People around me as well, with gate 35 as well. You really notice it. People that start things, they do this, they buy these things suddenly out of nowhere. It's like a disaster. And then at the end, it's like, oh, this is not for me. Okay. So it's like all this crisis going through. And of course, being in which I believe also, as you just said, I believe that you meet a lot of 35, being the 36 is in your personality here. Like, it's a common theme. But it's something that we'll keep going. I mean, can make, like, as I said earlier, for example, when I first discovered, like, the mind talking, where I immediately said, and now, why this is not happening? There was like, again, that immediate, right after you notice the mind talking, there is immediately this mind trying to get back in. Instantly, which said, now I'm impatient. I want this now. Yeah, it has to come. Yeah. And then there is the whole realm of going to fear transference and which,
Let's talk about that. That's fun, isn't it? Yeah. Especially with your undefined spleen transferring to fear. It's when I realized what was happening for me when I, these times when it would just, my nervous system would become so dysregulated over such a seemingly small thing, but, it would send me into this transference. Yeah. And same with distraction. I mean, so your probability, you go to possibility when you're in distraction. For my power to personal, I mean, that's a really hefty trip for me as well.
Power to personal. Yeah.
Similar sort of feeling where it's like, it's this panicked sort of feeling that I get in my body around my solar plexus, and the mind is going. And I think how you said something at the start of our conversation around, like, I think maybe it's perhaps my feeling cognition coming in, but it's like I sort of flag how something feels and try to remember it for next time. So it's like I'm in distraction because you don't always know it, or I'm in mild transference here, just to flag that feeling of it, which is connected with the mind and the thoughts that are coming through and how that particular flavor is expressing. But what's that like? What's that like for you, going to fear?
I mean, I would say that anytime, I mean, we know this already, like in this context, anytime we try to use our mind for us, intentionally, because the mind is very useful for us, unintentionally though, naturally, when it's at its place. Like, I feel as soon as I try to use it for me, trying to get to this and that and getting to know this and the other thing, I mean, is instantly us shifting towards very not natural frequency in my body. I can really sense frequencies quite a lot. As need is it is a passive tone. So it's a passive motivation. Fear is active. So when you notice your mind going all over the place, and then you feel the shaking in the body, not literally, but inside as a frequency theme, and then you sense it. You sense it when I express myself, whether I'm in a place of fear or in need, because need is a very passive motivation. It's what's needed, period. And then you move along. Then the body then goes and the mind follows, but without being attached to it, like without being interfering. Like the mind can help you. The mind knows what's needed. The mind can drive the other and show as another authority what's needed. And as well is a motive for me as well towards what's needed. But it's not something I'm going to look for. It's not something I use now. Okay, I want to see what is needed. If I already put myself into the spot, I want to find out what's needed. We already know where that comes from. Because it's active. It's an active tone, fear. So need is not. Need is what's needed is there. Not doesn't really need to be looked for.
Yeah.
It's something that
just happens.
And I mean, and it happens all the time. I mean, the transference there is it's something that, as I said, is going to be there since the end. It's like noticing it, really noticing, and you can sense the voice of somebody when I feel mine when I speak out of fear. Like I can feel it. Sometimes it just goes along a bit, and then you notice it, and there you are. You stop a bit.
Yeah.
But if we talk about human design, for example, I would say that this puts my motivation transference on a big educational test, I would say, a lot. Considering the logic nature of this system, which is strongly logic-oriented, human design is pattern-based. So it's really, it's a very deep, complicated, and it's an infinite system after all. You don't have a light again. It's so long, there are so many things, and if I put myself into a space of, like when I was reading earlier, for example, I told you, I want to go back now and see what that was, because I forgot. I have a right mind and a passive brain, I know what it is, and then I go back where that was. I go to the index of the book, and just like, I want to find that again. And that's fear transference. It goes to look for things because it thinks it needs to go and find out again. Whereas a receptivity, the need knows that what needs to come out will come out when it's drawn out from somebody else,
Yeah.
But and then you have the possibility, which yes, everything is possible, and so that we look for everything because we never know.
That sounds like a pretty when you're in distraction and transference, it's just a bit of a heyday, a mental heyday for you.
Yeah. Honestly, that's fun.
Yeah, all the things going off.
Maybe I can ask you a little thing.
Sure.
I was like a little bit curious to notice how do you experience your personal, because you are power. Yeah, and your distraction with a defined heart center. Like I have, because this is about what, it's something that I've been noticing in people quite a lot. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about it.
So my distraction to personal view with a defined ego?
Yeah.
Well, so with power view, there is, of course, a distraction, but there's also the distortion of power view. So being on a power trip. And it feels because they're very different when I distract to personal view versus being on a power trip as part of the distortion of that or not self. I would say that it is definitely amplified by my defined ego, And my personality Mars is in gate 26 as well,
Right.
which
Yeah.
comes into play with this party, as in I'm manipulating my memories of the
Yeah.
particular situation to save my ego. So it feels like righteousness, though. So the
Mhm.
distorted power view, I feel righteous, and a healthy ego doesn't, there's no righteousness. That's sort of an icky, toxic sort of thing,
Mhm.
right? And distracting to personal view when I'm taking everything personally, I mean, I almost feel like I'm Alice falling down
Yeah, I
into
get it.
Wonderland or something. I feel like I'm a little girl again.
Mhm.
It's that sort of thing. It takes me back to hoping that everyone's okay. Did I do the right thing? Is everything, it's
Yeah,
that
okay.
sort of
Get it.
egocentric, frantic, sort of scrambling. You're
Yeah.
scared, you're kind of like peeking behind the curtain. It's this sort of thing. You're walking on eggshells, you're being very careful. So that's how I experience that. But most
Yeah.
simply said, it's, I just take everything personally. And,
Right.
I think I've done something wrong. I'm a bad girl.
It's very interesting. I have a friend of mine with the same configuration, so it's exactly the same experience that she has. Yeah, it's
Oh,
very interesting to
interesting.
notice this with the defined heart center. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting as well. I think Power View, that's passive as well, right? Is Power View passive or active?
Not that is active because
It's
yeah,
active. Yeah, so and
one
that
three five are active. Yeah.
135, yeah, okay. And just to sort of see who's up, that's an interesting sort of thing for me, and I really enjoy that, and that's probably, I don't know, I've always found power quite delicious,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like it's something that I ever have to go looking for. And when I think that I need to do something to be more powerful, I'm
Mm.
100% on a trip.
Yeah.
I'm having a trip about it. And yeah, it's almost like a drug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. That's
Yeah.
pretty much how transference feels like it, yeah, isn't it? You just said something that makes a lot of sense. It's like is the whole not self that feels like an addiction, isn't it? It's like
Mm,
is not self is addicted by not self. That the true self doesn't have time to be concerned about any of those things. It's like a trigger or something that makes us jump or anything. A fear, anything that is correlated to the not self always likes to follow it and look for it because it wants it more. Like the true higher self is not something that it doesn't even um, vibrate with those frequencies.
mm,
So one feeds the other.
mm-hmm,
Like the not self, if you feed it, it will grow, and not intentionally again. If the real self is, if you feed the real self, it will grow. It's like I think there was a little, if I remember now, I think we'll be quick. A little story about a child asking to. I really like this. That friend of mine told me this in the past. Asking to her grandfather. There is this angry wolf and this docile wolf. And then he said, which one will win? Which is basically self and not self inside, right? I said,
mm,
which one of these will win? It's like the one that you feed the most.
yeah,
And this is a very good little thing. And yeah.
yeah. It's very true. It's very true. Um, I'm just having a look at my questions here and seeing which one's most important. I think that okay, for context for people, a couple
Yeah.
things, because not many people have a self projected authority.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to explain that a little bit, just as a bit of
Yeah.
an overview, also I think it would be really helpful for people to hear what your biggest learning curves has been as a projector, and maybe some of what you've worked through with perhaps energy or recognition or bitterness or
Yeah.
valuing yourself.
So, talking about my authority, I feel that it is almost as this definition in the G center, which is the identity center, is not something that is, first of all, something that's limited, but something, again, as we know, it is reliable as definition. So as a projector, this strategy of waiting for the invitation, it implies an external force for certain specific things. I would say something that really matters in life. I agree with occupation, bonds, places to live, and jobs, career. Looking at the society right now, so those are invitations that really have a strong impact. It depends what you say yes to or not. So that's when an invitation, waiting for the invitation, and then hearing my identity speaking upon that invitation to really notice the frequency of whether something is correct or not, is this natural, and this voice, this frequency that comes out without thinking about it, of course, is me. I don't need to soundboard. It's not a soundboarding authority. It's acoustic in the sense, is through the voice, is a G connected to the throat. So when I receive an invitation, when I say something, it might be right away, and I notice the frequency of that. If you have somebody close to you, not necessarily they have to tell you anything. That's not the point. Like with soundboarding authority, just listen to you. Very important, if you have somebody close to you with this, that they have awareness of design in this context, they might help you notice, did you hear the frequency of your voice when you said that? This is very important sometimes to help. Not that they condition you to, that was good, that was a good frequency or not. If you're very close to them and there is a lot of trust, of course, there are many different circumstances. But sometimes they just, wait a second, did you notice that frequency? Because when the identity speaks, it might be quick. It's spontaneous after all. It's not process based, right? So as a second line, also sometimes we need to be called out again. Like it's something that in the moment somebody invited us, and we might say, or we might, maybe there is a little bit of unclarity, and then somebody invites you again, and then the identity speaks, and you pick up the frequency, whether it's positive or not. And it's something that then you learn to notice over time. Although I would say, in my experience with this authority, I noticed that if we take those sort of invitations out of the occasion, and we just see a G center defined to the throat, is an identity, is a driving force that really has the potential to manifest, not in the sense as a manifestor, but to manifest into a movement forward. Talking about manifestation as a progression, like a movement forward, right? Not that you manifest anything. This is not about it. But sometimes this G center, this type of authority is and I would say that when the G center is defined, like many occasions, even if it's not the authority, I would say that, I'm not saying is what it is, but for me, in my design, is sometimes it invited me to correctness, in a sense. Not that somebody, now it's very tricky to get, and many people don't really want to hear this. I see in the space sometime, but because you say, so then you don't need to wait, so then the strategy doesn't apply to you. But that's not the case. Is, as I said just now, this invitation that comes from the outside. We live in a world where we need the other. We always need the other. We are all together with the other pretty much all the time. And specific invitation is necessary. Then a projector waits, gets invited, then it depends of the authority, then it's gonna move forward. But this G center defined, sometimes I feel it. That depends of the circumstances, but it's almost as if I have this higher self driver. I don't want to sound mystical or special, but it's like the way to describe it. This reliable driving force, directional identity that is kind of invites me to take the next step of moving in this direction. So it's, this is this kind of inner compass in a sense. And it is a rare authority in a sense, and I think that sometimes is also not misunderstood, but difficult to accept this aspect on. Yes, invitation, it is necessary, and waiting is necessary. But if we, along the way in this process, you kind of feel this authority when it's kind of start to drive you. And then there is this like, okay, but nobody invited you. Yes, nobody did. But I feel it's an inner feeling, of moving forward. And it is subtle. It is subtle, and it's something that gets refined, almost as if it is a second line naturalness over time.
Yeah.
Like, for example, to make an example of the place me and Mar live now, we lived here since June this year, 3 months, 3.5. Nobody invited us here, right? Now, we were in a previous place, and we were just a few days away from having to move. And I sense that this place is great. I think, in the sense, I sense we're both gonna feel good in here. It ended up being a very good choice. It's like my G center felt really drawn to it. Now, it's a tricky process, I would say, and this is something that I wouldn't put as a statement, into the system. This is my experience, and I wouldn't say to anybody, "Hey, look, this is what it is. Follow your G. Don't wait." That's not the point. Invitation always as a type is an aura, first of all. Strategy comes from the aura, and the aura is not something we have access to anyway. We can change it. The aura speaks, and the aura aligns through strategy. So the projector aura, whether it's this is the newness, on a sense, the virginity, let's gonna call it, of this system. It's very young. It's very young, and human beings are really a huge mystery. This system needs to be, from the specific being, research and scientifically progress forward is something that just born how much, like more than a few decades ago. So, there are all these nuances and mysteries of these specific parts of one's design that, for me, this direction movement from the G center is something that I feel. You don't find this much written in the books about this directional identity that a self-projected authority can have.
Yeah.
Is something that I live. And that's all.
I can really feel that. Like I can get the sense of what that would feel like to have that connection of your identity center through to the throat, and how you would feel moved through that.
Yeah.
Through through your trajectory, I suppose, through space and time. There is a mystical feeling to that. You've got a pot going on in your G, and your throat is maybe projected channels there. It's a much I'm feeling like a naturalness, it's more fluidity to it, I suppose, than a manifested channel, which is just got that power and that energy behind it. But there's some whimsy to it. It's a little bit whimsical. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but that's the sense that I get. And it's actually really beautiful. I've never tuned into that before.
Yeah, it's something that I personally, because it's not a manifested channel, for example, the G to the throat, like it would be to a motor. It's not a movement from the sacral, if you look at the 3420. Like, it's literally a sacral that moves through the throat. It's a voice from inside them. From the G center, it's something quite different, I would say. It's not manifest. It's not a movement through a sacral force. It's something very different. It's just, and it's not aware, because the G center is not an awareness center either. So it's
like liminal. It's almost liminal in a way.
Yes, it's kind of something that comes from somewhere, and And I wouldn't be surprised that many people with, even though their authority is not self-projected, but with a G center defined to the throat, I wouldn't be surprised if they feel something similar. And of course, now consider that my only 2 centers defined, it can be maybe more, I don't know, attuned in a sense, maybe with a lot more definition, can be a little bit more noise, but it doesn't really. I think it's an aspect that over time will be more and more discovered. Maybe this G to throat situation. Yeah.
So If you were to pick one thing as your biggest learning as a projector, what has that been?
Well, certainly, just clearly speaking, shut up. If
Yeah.
nobody asks you,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. I mean, that's really is. Man, it's taking a long time. It takes a long time. But that's it. I mean, you know that is that's it. It is.
Yeah.
It is the thing that I would say it is.
Yeah.
And it's okay if sometimes it escapes, you know. I mean, we are not perfect.
It's
I mean,
funny. I play with that sometimes. So I go to Toastmasters every couple weeks here. Do you know what
uh,
Toastmasters is? Yeah. Some people don't, which I find really surprising because I thought everybody knew what Toastmasters was, but and it's public speaking. And if I'm just out with a few friends for lunch or something, when I say something and people actually hear me because I wasn't directly asked, like I'm always so surprised. Wow, I can't believe you actually heard me. Back in my 20s, I remember it was, I mean, if you don't understand that you have an undefined throat
yeah,
and
yeah,
what that means, I remember sitting in a living room with all my college friends and I'd say something and just get completely ignored. And that's a
yeah, yeah.
pretty big trip. It's like, what? Am I not worth listening to? Like, is no one going to even acknowledge that I just said something? But now it's almost funny. Like, I'll say something and just get completely, like, nobody will hear me. And I'm like, cool, whatever. Let's just go.
Yeah.
But yeah, the shut up is
I mean, it is a big thing. And I wanted to say also, it's really pleasant to hear your undefined throat speaking.
oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a pleasant frequency. Yeah, it's like
Thank you.
honestly speaking. Yeah,
Ah, appreciate that. It's funny. I've had that feedback quite a bit from people, and
mm,
which I find sort of interesting. And I have had
yeah,
an insecurity around, and I think it's to do with my not self, with my undefined solar plexus, with my 37 and my 22,
mm,
that are undefined. They condition my mind pretty heavily, and it's like I I have a trip around thinking that I need to be polite. And if I sense something or I need to,
yeah.
something I want to say, like I will try and find the exact right words for it and just to maintain the family and the friendly bonds with people. And I had a woman say to me recently that whatever you have to say, because of the frequency of your voice, people are going to take it fine because of the frequency of what you have to say. Whereas in my mind, I'm tiptoeing around the thing that I
Yeah.
want to say because, you know,
I mean,
I'm.
I felt it. I'm not is a good frequency, so this
Hmm.
to me would make sense personally.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I mean, okay, so we've been going for about an hour and a half, and I really did want to ask you about your PHS, and
Yeah,
I had like a couple other questions. You're starting to offer sessions for people,
yeah,
right? And in line also with your life guidance and your authority guidance, which was something that I wanted to bring up earlier because I wanted
yeah.
to ask you about this authority guidance session, like, but now I understand. I mean, do you offer that because you see a need for people to have some support in learning to trust their authority and sort of navigate that?
I personally offer it because I believe that it's something that people tend to overlook pretty early in the experiment. It's a
And get on
natural
top of it.
tendency to, it is a natural tendency to get to know your authority and then thinking that you're done with it and you can just move forward to the immense depth of the system, which I would say that for somebody can even work. But I believe that the authority, as I said earlier, together with the strategy, is the most important aspect of one's experiment, after all. Is the one that brings alignment to everything. And sometimes we might not consider so much through which channels that authority is defined. Mine is 731 and 1020 is very different from a self-projected authority from the 18 or the 1333. So
Mm,
it's bringing some support, some guidance to actually recognize the specific nuances in one's authority and taking the time to really get to it. And
mm,
maybe people and people have to feel it. They kind of have to notice when they need to go back and refresh a little, because after all, as I said, the authority is everything, and the strategy as well. We talk about two basic and the most definitive important aspect of this, of one's alignment, right? So I thought to offer that because I really believe that can be beneficial for many to go through the authority process again and maybe see it from another perspective, or like getting a bit refined in it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I'm someone who, when I initially found design, it was around the same time as you. Uh, I started doing some training with Karen Curry Parker. I hadn't even heard of
Yeah.
Ra Uru. I didn't
Okay.
even know who Ra
Yeah.
was. So it was very like heady, diving into like very surface level information about it. Like it was just, and I was being very strategic about it, you know, what I can do with it, what sort of money I can make from it. Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
all of this, you know. And so, and then I slowly, and it probably wasn't until beginning of last year, but 2023, that I finally like really went, holy shit, like there is actually so much to this. And I'm starting to
Yeah.
see how it's really like how it's playing out in my life and the value of it and everything, as opposed to manifestor's impact and, you know, inform and all of these the textbooky things. But coming back, you know, it's like when you sort of go, okay, there's something real in the system, and there's different layers, I think, that you sort of go to within yourself as you go through your own journey. But coming, you know, there is a point as a projector where you go, what the fuck does it actually mean to wait for the invitation? Like, what are you supposed to do with your life? And I mean, this is probably amplified with me craving change and doing anything to avoid boredom. But that was, it's like, it's not, none of this is really complex, but it is difficult to comprehend, I think, because of how we're also conditioned. And I think it's probably worth saying for any projectors that listen to this, where like literally what I've come to find, and I'd love to hear if there's anything different that you think about this, but it's like, just do whatever the hell you want. And in between, and do your very best to just wait and to see what environment you find yourself in naturally, see what sort of people start to recognize you and see you, what sort of jobs you find yourself in, where you find yourself living, and slowly
Mm.
Uranian bodies, sometimes the sidetrack is exactly what you need to get
Yeah.
you onto the
Exactly.
right track. And, you know, there is not so subtle difference now. It hasn't always been so obvious, but when I'm there initiating with my mind to make something happen versus like what's my agenda behind that, and then also knowing when I have my spleen's blessing for something, if I feel nervous about something, that isn't necessarily a no. It just means I feel a bit nervous about it, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Like there's just so many different little nuanced experiences that we have as human beings that can make it a little bit tricky. But as you go and you know, follow your PHS and you do your best to follow the experiment, and you screw up, and then you might do something
Yeah.
right, and you see how it works out. Like you slowly get to being at a place within yourself where you're feeling a lot more solid and comfortable in following your strategy and your authority, and trusting that. And it's almost like you know how to work this machine a little bit better at that
Yeah.
point. That's probably a
Yeah.
good way to put it. I've never said it like that, but
It
it's
is.
like, okay, I'm going to actually go against my authority because that's just what I feel like I have to do here. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Basically.
know?
Yeah. And maybe you need it. Yeah. I mean, really. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
I mean, the authority is not something that I would say, I don't think it's something that needs to be understood. It's something that needs to be discovered and just
yeah.
live. Like I made this thing in one of the stories this day that I get to the point of actually seeing, okay, we live in a strategic world, right? We are here to survive after all, because otherwise we die in a way or another, according to the, this age and place we live now. And after all, we live in a strategic world. Even if we are a right-oriented being, we kind of need to adapt to it in a way or another because it's still strongly dominated. Like the strategy is something seen after all, is left. Strategy is left. Strategic is pointing to the left. Authority is like more something looked as right. It's something that is really is the being and is pointed towards right. So look at the strategy and authority. Strategy is something as is left, fixed strategy to survive, move forward. Authority, which is the being, which is the inner guidance that is not strategic at all. It's just a being, it's the being. So if you look strategy on the left and authority on the right, this is quite a thing to notice. And it's this architecture that is there all the time, since the beginning, down to the tonal level. It's creating the whole.
Yeah.
And as you said, the path is also not following it sometime. Otherwise, I mean, I wouldn't imagine we wouldn't even incarnate if it wasn't for. And if we are here, it's because we need to go through this realm of madness, in a sense, that we in this pain. So it's necessary.
So through this journey, we can become quite identified with who we are. And I think you see through that really wonderfully, actually. It seems like you managed to keep that front of mind somehow, or wherever it sits. So my question is, we can become very identified with our nature in today's age, with or without design, I suppose. And who are you when not identified with your nature?
My real nature. When I'm not identified with my real, it depends from where that identification comes from. It means that what is left is who I really am, and that's it. Because there is no interference. That's all I can say, you know.
I like it.
I mean, after all, design is a graphic representation of one's uniqueness. Like the body graph, you can just see it graphically expressed here in a drawing. But then you know, that's what the eye sees, though. I mean, it's quite a thing, this one. But yeah, that's pretty much what I can say. All is left is me, in a way or another.
I love it. All is left is me. That's perfect. Well, thank you very much, Giacomo.
Thank you.
Am I saying that right? Giacomo?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
almost maybe 90% perfect.
Right.
This has been really a fun conversation. I've really loved to connect with you like this, real time, face to face. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that maybe you thought you might want to say or share, or is on your G that you want to say?
To be honest, I believe that it's pretty good. I mean, if something might come up later in like 20 minutes or something, or an hour. But you know, yeah, no, it's always like it. But it feels all right. Yeah.
Okay, feels complete. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you. I really look forward to seeing what you're going to create next. Your personal training and PHS and that whole thing is very interesting. So I'll be curious to see where you continue to take things through your study and your experimentation.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wish you all the best with your move back to Italy. I hope that it is okay for you and Mar. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I also wanted to say that has been very good. I really appreciated it. And I pick up a very good frequency, and your questions were really great. You know, it creates a very good flow, energetic flow, a very nice frequency. So I felt was a very nice attunement. And this question was very great. They were all very great because the flow went very well. And thank you so much for this invitation. I really appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, Giacomo. Take care. Have an amazing day. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for tuning into this conversation with myself and Giacomo Marcone. I hope that it was interesting and you learned a few things about yourself or perhaps someone else in your life. Stay tuned. We'll see who's up as a guest next. Have an amazing morning, afternoon, or night. Thank you so much for being here.